Good morning, Mo'ay Rabotai. Be'ez Hashem Mincha is going to be 5:10. Please be on time. The Halacha tells us about a Bandaid. Is one allowed to use a Bandaid on Shabbat if it's for, let's say, a child or even for an adult? Is this mutar to do? Or is there an issue, perhaps an issue of attaching parts that were not attached for Shabbat, or the fact that you're tearing the wrapper that's on the outside and also the part that sticks? There's a little piece of paper that they put on the bandage that you take it off so that the sticky part can stick onto the adhesive can go onto the skin. So the Halacha Ovadia says that it is mutar to use a Bandaid on Shabbat. There's not an issue, not of tofer, not of korea, and not of makebe patish. All the various issues. So let's take one by one. Makebe patish means making an instrument. You're not making an instrument. The instrument was already made. This is using an instrument. And in terms of korea, the fact that you're tearing the outside, the tearing of the outside that the Bandaid is enclosed in, that's called mikalkel. That's not a tearing that's fixing. That's a tearing that's ruining. And therefore, since it's a tearing that's ruining and is not for the purpose of fixing, so whenever there's a need, that is permitted. So that would be allowed. And in terms of the fact that you're removing the edges that allow it to stick, the little pieces of paper, that's also not an issue because they weren't attached in a permanent fashion. They were attached definitionally temporarily in order for it to be removed. And therefore, that is not similar to the tearing or to the removing that the Gemara had. So therefore, and also the attaching on the skin is not a problem because that's also of temporary nature. And therefore, all the potential issues that could possibly arise are all fine. And therefore, one is mutar. It is permitted to use a Bandaid on Shabbat. And one might ask, what about refu'ah? That it's medicine. It's like a form of medicine. It heals the wound. So that's also not a problem because usually when you put on a Bandaid, it's not for medicine. You're putting it on to protect from the outside elements so that the other elements don't come along and infect it, or that they don't rub on it. A lot of times it becomes very sensitive, but it's not for a purpose that's positive, but to remove a negative. And that's not called medicine. And therefore that also is not an issue. Halacha lema'aseh, one is permitted to use a Bandaid, to put on a Bandaid for a child or for an adult on Shabbat without there being isur. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.